Truth, logic, action, power. It's the GreggHoush Show here on New Revolutionary Radio. From the Leonard School in Malden, Massachusetts, Gregg and company are here to bring a sense of ethics to your news. Whether it's politics, activism, or current events, we always seek to inform and never to deceive. Let's start the show.
Hello and welcome to episode 63 of the GreggHoush Show, here with co-host Mac, sometimes co-host Anna, and our special guest Sam Hammer, who is running for a state seat here. And we're going to let Anna do a little introduction on that one.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for putting me on the spot. As everybody who listens to the podcast regularly knows, I show up when there's local politics to talk about because Gregg can't be bothered. Anyway, Sam Hammer here is a primary challenger in the state Senate. She's running for, what is it, CD5?
Middlesex 5?
Middlesex 5. See, I can't keep track of this either.
I'll do whatever you said too.
Yeah.
Ready for all the things.
But you started deciding you wanted to run right after the Trump thing, I think.
So I never thought I would be running for office. It's kind of certifiably crazy, but I've been in government quite a long time. I was a teacher. I worked at City Hall in Boston. And then I just started to feel more and more pressure for the real-time economics for working families in Massachusetts, housing, childcare. We had twins, all the things, student loan debt, senior care. But I eventually got really frustrated. I spent more time at the state and watched a lot of what was happening under the Golden Dome, and just decided that instead of just being really frustrated and continuing to just be a bystander and observer, I just needed to jump in and get involved. So I couldn't sit idle by. So I quit, and here I am doing this new thing.
And relevant to some of the more tech-minded folks, I know that you did some tech work at Beacon Hill.
Yes.
Do you want to get into that just a teeny tiny bit before we jump in? Tiny bit.
So digital services, so we can do things better, faster, cheaper for people, so that they don't have to wait in line in the cold or fax things to us at the state or at the city. So I helped run and build a digital services team where we would build it or buy it. And it was pretty great. And I think we can test and do things in lean startup method at the state before we start to procure things for tens of millions of dollars that end up just failing.
That is actually wonderful. That is how all of this should be done.
I love having tech, literate people involved in government. I know we've definitely yelled, maybe on the show, maybe at the office. I can't even remember these days, but we've definitely had some issues where Congress would say something incredibly stupid about technology, and you'd be like, why?
Yep.
Why don't you understand what a Facebook is? Why is this so hard for you?
Well, I think part of it is that most people have to be digitally minded because physically they cannot get out of their homes. Physically, they cannot make it to City Hall during work days. Physically, they cannot fax things. And so smartphones are all over the place. It doesn't take a lot to actually make government more efficient and more cost effective to just put things in the digital space and then help people get there.
Beyond all of its, we'll call it, racist problems. Estonia is a good place to look at for, how they're running their online governments. If you've ever met anyone who can log you into their system, I've gotten to play around on it before, and it's neat. They can do literally everything on the online government portal. They've closed over 90% of the government office buildings in Estonia over the last decade because they've moved everything digital. All voting is online. Most money is digital currency, with their ID card also being their currency card. It's just amazing to look at. There's a lot of cool models there to play around with. And, we are lucky in this state that we have a lot of tech-minded people coming out of college and for some reason or another not moving back home. And, some of them are getting into government. So hopefully a few more do, because we definitely need the help here. I mean, you said fax. I literally know people old enough to now need to start dealing with paperwork who still don't know what that word means. It's that antiquated. And yet there are still places that require you to fax something.
Yep.
It's crazy. Crazy stuff. So we're going to kind of get into a lot of the current events that we normally talk about around here and then go back to a little more local stuff after we yell a lot about Trump as per usual.
I really feel like we need to reset up our little quiet booth that we had in the studio before, because I need someplace safe to just scream forever.
So, we're going to start with the Supreme Court, as they have been nothing but a trash fire for a little while now. And here we are with the latest Ohio versus American Express, where American Express are doing something unbelievably anti-competitive, driving up prices 20 times in 5 years, in fact, with clauses that specifically, disallow people from encouraging cardholders to use competitors' cards because American Express's charges are way higher, the fees are way higher, and it's called their anti-steering provisions. And lower courts, of course, said, oh yeah, that totally violates the Sherman Antitrust Act. Then other courts said, no, it doesn't. And then you get a little back and forth, and then it gets to the Supreme Court, who says, nope, totally this anti-competitive behavior and antitrust behavior in no way violates the law that's specifically built to stop that.
And now the impressive part about the decision they came to is that their reasoning is just like, so basically their reasoning was that in order for it to be a violation of the Antitrust Act, it would have to affect every single person basically involved in the transaction negatively except the business itself. So because they're a merchant services provider, essentially, they deal with both merchants and the cardholders themselves. It has to, according to this new interpretation by the court, they would have to actually be harming both the merchants and the cardholders in order for it to be a violation of the Antitrust Act.
But if they harm just one of them on one side, then it's not a violation because, someone got good on the deal. So we're cool here.
And the worst part is the implications of the reasoning mean that like anyone that can argue that their business has multiple different like parties being that are being serviced as part of the contract is you can't prove ever that they were engaging in anti-competitive behavior because you have to prove something that why would they ever make that true? They don't have to screw over both sides.
And just randomly choose which side today they're screwing.
Like, I mean, that goes to, I mean, there's cases already where tons of businesses that already provide some sort of intermediary service where there are two parties like that. But then you look at ones like Google, where they don't strictly do that at the moment. That no point is there the single transaction where they're both sides, except of course, with the AdWords platform itself.
Yeah.
But then, so maybe they could carve out an exclusion there, but like in other parts of their business currently, you could go after them for anti-competitive behaviors. But now they could argue that, well, on the one hand, we're providing the service by interfacing with indexing content. And on the other hand, we're providing the search and retrieval to provide that to people that put in a search query. So really, we're providing both sides of that. And now you can never go after Google for antitrust anything because you have to prove that we were harming both the people that were doing the searches and the people that wanted to reach the people doing the searches.
That is our Supreme Court today. And thanks to, Kennedy retiring here, it's only going to get worse.
So I see on here that this was another 5-4 decision.
Yeah, and it was
to
from
Gorsuch.
last week, just like all the ones we talked about last week that were also 5-4.
Are the lines just solid forever now? Like, it doesn't
Not
seem like we're ever going to
quite,
get
but
another
like
flip.
basically, I mean, there's always the rare topic where there's the one justice that will vote on the side that isn't the side they usually vote on. But
that used to be Kennedy. He used to be our
used
swing.
to be Kennedy. And
I don't even like Kennedy, but at least he was the swing,
and
we
now
need that.
What's going to pass for our swing vote, as horrifying as this is John Roberts.
Mm-hmm. Aww.
That
Yeah,
hurts.
right? Like, it was bad enough when Anthony Kennedy was the swing
I
vote.
know.
And now John fucking Roberts is the swing
Like,
vote.
after the next election, when 3 more of these people go, the swing vote is going to literally be like I mean, the swing vote is going to be a Southern Baptist preacher. Like,
I was gonna joke that it would be Clarence Thomas, but we just know that's never gonna happen.
how did that happen at all? That's a whole nother story.
Yeah, how is that man serving on the court?
Wow. I will tell you that I do not know, and I really wish he wasn't.
There are a number of other people that are regretting decisions they made that helped allow him to be.
So there are kind of 3 front runners now, it looks like, for the nomination to replace Kennedy.
Yeah, we heard that there's a short list that's down to 3, and there are reports on who those 3 are, although it's not 100% certain that these are, in fact, the 3. We heard from some sources that apparently 2 on the list were women, but the list that we actually have names for of top 3 only has 1 woman. So, there may be a little bit of variation there, but
specifically that woman is the one out of these 3 that it looks like has no chance at actually getting the job.
I mean, she might. She is young, comparatively speaking, only 46 years old. So she'd have the opportunity to continue influencing the court for all too many decades to come, most likely. She has almost no experience on the federal appeals bench. So she'd be following in the footsteps of Clarence Thomas there.
So this is Amy Coney Barrett?
Yes.
Amy Coney Barrett.
Who became a federal appeals court judge last November.
So lots of experience.
But
as much experience at that job as Trump had at politics.
Well, she has slightly more. Slightly more.
But it does seem like a move that Trump would pull to just put one of his nominees up there.
Also, she is also the one that is widely viewed as the single most likely of the 3 to specifically go after Roe versus Wade.
Yes.
Because she is a particular hardline Catholic revivalist group member from this sort of borderline cult called People of Praise, where they swear an oath of loyalty to the group and give each other input on personal life decisions and all this kind of weird personal tie
culty
to their
kind
little,
of stuff.
Yeah, culty kind of stuff.
There you go.
But yeah, so she's viewed as she's possibly the one that might stand a chance of getting the position just based off of that.
Right, but this is the part that scares me the most. She co-authored a piece that rejected Justice William Brennan's argument that Catholic judges should always hold the Constitution is more important than their religious faith.
Yeah, but it's okay because when she was asked about that in the Senate confirmation hearing, she said that was just the co-author of the piece's view, and she doesn't agree with that at all. And you can totally trust that.
I believe that. That's not at all a lie.
No one. Why would anyone ever, co-author a thing that they disagreed with key portions of, and then later on have to walk that back without having it, already like, yes, I co-authored this, but I didn't agree with all the portions.
Well then, and next up is Brett Kavanaugh, 53, a protege of Kenneth Starr.
Yeah, he actually wrote a big chunk of the Starr report, and
the Starr report being the one that said impeach Bill Clinton.
Right, and specifically advocated for that, and he also was part of the investigation into the death of Vince Foster. Then he was on the
suicide, possible suicide of the Clinton aide, Vince Foster. Yes.
Then he went from that to and the Starr special counsel to working for the George W. Bush campaign. He actually represented them in the case related to the Florida voting recount in 2000.
So he's had his fingers in every single pie that I hate.
Oh, you say that, but you don't know what he's been up to recently. Because do you remember that case not too long ago where there was the 15-week pregnant 17-year-old undocumented immigrant being held, and she wanted an abortion, and, law enforcement was being a huge pain about allowing her to get her actual medical care? Well, it turns out he's actually the judge that said that it totally wasn't an undue burden to force her to wait to get a sponsor. That was him.
Yeah, that was him. he is up for the Supreme Court nomination.
If you want the full hat trick, he's also gone after the Clean Air Act and the CFPB. So
Yeah, because
Consumer
Financial
Financial Protection Bureau.
Yeah.
That's good. That's right there. That's
You've
great.
just literally described all the worst parts of a human being, but in one.
Yeah, one guy has all that.
It's kind of impressive in a certain way.
And I mean, just continuing down the list, we've got Raymond Ketledge, 51, and
he's basically viewed as a clone of Gorsuch.
Yeah.
That seems to be his. That and the fact that his strongest recommendation is the fact that he apparently hit it off with Trump like you wouldn't believe. So, if that's not a glowing recommendation, it is quite possibly the thing that will still get him the position anyway.
So these are the people that could get lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court.
It's really exciting in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So guess what happens if they overturn Roe versus Wade nationally?
I was hoping you'd go there.
Over here in our wonderful state, they decided since Roe v. Wade happened, they didn't have to worry about removing it from the books here. And so here it is still illegal to get abortions. But the federal currently trumps that right now until that gets undone. And then suddenly the state house has to deal with it.
Right.
Yes.
Because 45 years after Roe v. Wade was not enough time.
And there's many other states who have the same problem. If the federal protection goes away, the state itself has a law on the books saying it is illegal to get abortions.
Not many, but a few.
What is it?
11?
I think it's something like 11.
Yeah, it's small. It's small, but
And I think Ohio is trying to put through a new ban because they're really excited to be the case that gets to overturn Roe v. Wade. You can see it in their fucking eyes.
yeah. Ohio needs to stick to just, I'm wearing the NASA shirt. It needs to stick to just pumping out astronauts.
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Seems
That's
to be
the
the
thing
one
they're
thing
best
they're
at.
good
Yeah, just make
That's the thing
astronauts
they're
and shut
best
up.
at. Something like 80% of the astronauts we've put into space or onto the moon are from Ohio. So it's crazy.
At one time, they were good at producing presidents, apparently, but that's way past.
So anyways,
No.
that's
Okay,
your
well,
upcoming
prolific,
Supreme Court.
Prolific.
Look,
Right there.
percentage I would have accepted. Look at what we've got.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, setting a high bar, aren't we?
Right.
Better than Trump. That's not.
No,
I mean,
it's
I
not.
would accept Roseanne Barr over Trump. I mean, so it's not a high
Ouch.
bar,
No, I would too, because at least she'd
Yeah.
be funny while she's burning it all to
It's
the
true.
ground.
right?
Trump isn't funny about it.
So now that we're talking all about our best friend Roseanne Barr. Let's talk about Trump some more.
I mean, that just seemed like the inevitable outcome here was that this was going to come back to Trump because
Because
every
his
shitty thing we
stupid
ended up
fucking
talking about
face.
every damn week.
Were there shows before Trump? And what did you talk about then?
there
We
were
talked about like hacking,
hacking,
yeah.
technology,
Now just
fun
hacks.
stuff.
All kinds of social
talked
issues
about
and stuff.
history.
Yeah.
It was so great.
Yeah, we
now
had
we're on
time to
fire all
actually
the
think
time.
about like other things that have happened in the world at various
Now
points.
so
that-
much news happens, like every day, like 10 things happen that make you wish that this guy wasn't in power, that there's nothing else to talk about because it's all so amazing in the most horrible ways.
Yeah, in whatever way you wish to discuss something amazing, there was something to fill your day.
Awesome in like the horrific sense.
Yes, awesome, and that it is awe-inspiring and not in a good way.
Yes, I do find myself in that weird spot where I talk to Roseanne and I do kind of strangely consider her a friend, and we can't anymore have any conversations lately without us, like pausing for like ever. With anything I say, like takes her now like a day to respond to me because we know better than to get into the arguments. And it's weird because, it's the strangest thing, man, because she is absolutely wrong on every one of these points. And when I tell her, I just get yelled at. What are you going to do? So here we are on Michael Cohen again.
Yeah, once again.
Michael Cohen, of course, is choosing whether he wants to go to prison or not for 10 years or 100 years,
Well,
I believe.
it's
I believe
actually-
that's the choice.
It seems to be uncertain. There seems to be some uncertainty as to whether he has any choice in the matter because the prosecutors may just not be interested in making that deal with him.
They weren't that interested with Flynn either for a little bit, and then he said something.
Yeah,
Because then they
no.
were like, oh, wait a minute, no, now you got a deal.
Yeah, but I mean, they already come on, they already got all of Cohen's files. And like they've had like 5 people flip. Like what more?
And if you're Michael Cohen, again, I would like to ask how you have the Amazon Basics shredder at your office, the one that lets anyone go through your trash and put the stuff back together.
To be fair,
you
when
need
we
the one that
actually-
cuts
no,
down and then
'cause
side cuts them as they fall. Like I mean,
we saw the reconstructed documents that they got out of the shredder, and it turned out that they weren't much of anything. We
Sure,
didn't
just-
get to see the 700 pages of printouts from his WhatsApp logs, but
So Michael Cohen has hired, the lawyer you hire when you're about to flip, Guy Petrillo, and the joint defense agreement with Trump goes away as soon as Petrillo actually assumes his role here. And what's funny about all of that is exactly what Flynn did a week before flipping.
well, I mean, it's one of those moves that's very revealing
Yeah.
because the joint defense agreement, if you had that in the first place with someone and it goes away, it means that at one time you perceived your legal interests, or your lawyer perceived your legal interests as being aligned with that person. And now they've decided that your legal interests and that person's legal interests are not the same. So, that is a pretty telling statement right there, regardless of the context of Flynn having done so literally just about a week before flipping.
And he spent the last couple weeks kind of repeating this same line about where his priorities are.
Yeah.
Family, country, not Trump anymore.
Yes.
And he's been very clear on that one. But he also said, quote, "Once I understand what charges might be filed against me, if any at all, I will defer to my new counsel, Guy Petrillo, for guidance." Now, I think the "if any at all" is funny because,
Yeah.
I mean, the only way they don't get filed is if he flips so hard that, like, the world changes on his words. Like, that's the only way I see him not getting charges. Because he did a lot of bad things for a lot of bad people, and they have all the proof. And, I might not like the special prosecutor, the counselor, as a human being, and I might not like the things he's done in his past, but I will say he looks really good at his job, and I hope he gets him this time.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I don't normally hope they get anyone.
right? Like, I often disagree with the Justice Department's priorities and
Exactly.
means of going after things, but I do not question Robert Mueller's competence on that topic.
No. So this will be funny. And then, of course, Sater and probably everyone else anywhere near Trump at this point, they're cleaning up their online presences, removing, instances.
we know
But
that
Sater himself
someone-
is specifically paying like a reputation management firm or something.
Well, someone is, and it's not just one. The Daily Beast actually managed to identify multiple firms in Indonesia and India that have been hired by people unspecified, specifically to write or publish articles talking up how the tax fraud charges against Felix Sater were dismissed, and meanwhile also distancing him from Donald Trump. So, maybe it's Felix Sater that's doing that. Maybe it's someone else that's a little farther behind the scenes.
Remind me who Sater is.
Felix Sater is the son of the Russian mafia boss's underboss, and the longtime Trump associate, these ex-Russian mafia, sometimes FBI informant, once went to prison for stabbing someone with the stem of martini glass.
Definitely sounds like somebody you want over for drinks.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like he had a...
If you've got somebody for him to kill and he's coming in to fulfill the contract, sure. But other than that, though,
It's not like he had an
don't invite him over.
extensive criminal record and record as a member of organized crime and as a law enforcement informant, all before he got involved in the Trump campaign. So regardless of what position you thought, like Donald Trump had a reason to take on this, it was still a dumb move. There's no possible combination there that looks good.
So now we get to watch as he cleans up his online presence and see how that helps him. It won't, because there's way too much out there on him at this point. I mean, you got to spend he has a lot of money, but you got to spend a lot of money to scrub the internet of all your wrongdoings when your wrongdoings are like a rap sheet 50 pages long.
And especially when a bunch of it is the sort of stuff that was high enough profile, though that ended up in archive.org.
It took me years of work to get all of my stuff back to page 10. Nobody searched that deep. It's not good.
Greg, when you bring that up, people
Now
are
everyone-
gonna look. Some bad tactical
Google is
moves
going to
there.
be re-indexing some results tonight.
So Trump now wants to spend another wonderful evening alone with Putin.
Yeah.
with
Well, I mean,
no aides involved.
this time actually alone.
Yeah, without even an aide in the room.
Yeah. And
Is he bringing candles and chocolate?
he hasn't specified, but I assume that being Donald Trump, the answer is no. He's expecting someone else to provide that.
That
Yes,
makes sense.
yes,
Is he
yes.
at least going to bring a rubber sheet for the bed?
Wow.
That seems unlikely.
Wow, okay.
Another point. Thanks for you brought it up instead of me.
Yes. So
It's important when you're in politics to have people around to say the awful things so you don't have to. You can
Yes.
just giggle at it.
So Trump's going to meet Putin in Helsinki on July 16th, and Trump plans to meet with him one-on-one at the beginning before allowing other people to join.
Literally one-on-one. No translator, no aid,
Well,
nothing.
They don't need it
well,
technically. I mean, you know.
Yes.
While
I
Putin
mean-
loves to do all of his actual politics in Russian, he speaks English just fine.
Of course. And it just so happens, though, that, the last time Trump and Putin had that little private chat, that was actually at G20 almost exactly a year ago. And it was at the dinner there, they had like a little private get together in the room with everyone, but it was just them and the translator. It was
But
very intimate.
The
Very
language of love
intimate.
is universal.
It is.
And Donald Trump doesn't speak it.
Yeah, at all. I mean, I have to say it, but I would assume in that, that Putin's the power top.
Yeah. One can only assume.
So moving on to
Anything
Trump,
else? Literally
you know,
anything else.
Konstantin Kalimnik, who we've talked about many times as involved in all of this, seems to be more involved than we even knew.
Which is impressive given all the stuff we had learned just in even the last month.
Because it now looks like Kalimnik has been involved with Manafort all the way back to at least 2004.
And not just as some sort of little minor
I knew this
underling. No, he was
No.
actively involved in all of the planning for all of the stuff Manafort was up to.
Like Eurasia 21.
Yeah, and all the deals with Deripaska. Not only was he the guy that was the go-between with Deripaska later on, but from the start, he was working with Manafort to make the plans in the beginning.
And here is just, the wonderful, absolutely, I think, treasonous thing that Kalimnik and Manafort were talking
it's
about.
not really treasonous for Kalimnik.
No, but I bet Manafort's response was.
Oh, I bet.
This is a quote from Kalimnik to Manafort in December 2004. Quote, "The West is just a little more skillful at playing the modern game, where perception by the world public opinion and the spin is more important than what is actually going on. Russia is ultimately going to lose if they do not learn how to play this game." End quote.
Remember that 2 years later, Manafort and Kalimnik and all of their cronies were working for Deripaska to promote the interests of Russia and Ukraine.
They used basically that knowledge and Kalimnik's, understanding of just how far behind Russia was to catapult it way off into an advanced state far beyond what America can do currently online in the propaganda sphere. For the most part, while it was Russian money, there were a fair amount of Americans like Manafort actually doing that work to really bring Russia way ahead of us online. And I just see Manafort going away for the rest of his life on this one.
Yeah, it doesn't
I hope
seem
so
likely
anyways.
that he ever leaves prison. Well, I mean, I guess at the moment he's technically in jail and will have to be transferred to prison at some point, but
I think it's interesting because, the American government is definitely behind where the Russian government is, but the American populace, we've got this meme shit down.
Yeah, and you look at Russia and what goes on in the media there to build up Putin's image, and it's almost as unsophisticated as the stuff that was airing or being printed in Pravda during the era where all of the Russian citizens were knowing that everything that printed there was just bullshit and they didn't take it seriously.
Right, but literally you can just go with the modern equivalent, anything said in North Korea by the media.
Right.
I mean, it's that level
but
of
it's weird that they
our
were
leader.
aware of that in the Soviet era, and now they're still using basically the same exact tactics and material, and everyone in Russia is just forgotten.
No, I don't think it's people in Russia have forgotten. Like, they are not stupid. Pussy Riot doesn't exist for no reason.
Sure, but I actually have had these talks. In fact, I sat down and had dinner with the head of Red Square's film festival every year. Selena is awesome, by the way. But she came to South by Southwest to help show some Russian films there. And we got to go out after watching each other's documentaries that were showing there. And it was a lot of fun talking to her. But the thing that she hated the most was how controlled she was by the Kremlin in terms of what she was allowed to show. She wasn't going to violate that or speak, out loudly in Russia about it. But she was just saying, like, it's film. I'm supposed to be allowed to show these things, even if they happen to talk badly about the government. And what was interesting is we got into talking about local, activism. And I was talking to her about, I have a lot of Russian friends. I in fact, spent time there. And what's really interesting about my Russian friends, specifically who live in the Moscow area, and some in St. Petersburg, but like they say their biggest fight is not against the government. It's against all the other activists who now gave up because their families are so comfortable under Putin. Even though their economy is so repressed compared to where it could be or was, there are still so many families of the types of people who are, in a sense, capable of being activists, because you do have to be at a certain level. You can't be just out on the street homeless or really super wealthy. There's kind of a middle ground where a lot of the activists who march, come from. And all of them are, their argument for me is, yeah, but 20 years ago, as a 4-year-old, I was standing in line for bread for 6 hours. And now my dad drives a Mercedes. So Putin can stay. Instead of, we need to go to the streets and get rid of this new dictator. Yeah, and that's the problem we have.
That is a huge problem.
The people who would be the largest base of actual protesters there feel comfortable enough and remember how uncomfortable they were that they're not out there doing anything about it. It's interesting.
The I got mine problem is a big one. And, you see it a lot in the nice white ladies who are out in the streets right now, because they'll say things like, if it weren't for Trump, I'd be out getting brunch right now. Like, honey, there were problems under Obama too. There would still be problems now under Clinton had she been elected. Like, the fact that you're only here because of Trump is kind of
part of the problem
in and of itself problematic.
Yeah. Kind of how people like Trump actually rise to power too.
Yeah. Right.
So that's wonderful. Kalimnik has been around for a long time, and it turns out a lot longer than we assumed with Manafort. And it also turns out a lot more integral in actually planning out the work that Manafort did to really prop up Russia online and in many other sectors. So now Mueller is, of course, doing what you do. He is hiring a bunch more FBI agents and talking to a bunch more people in the Justice Department and hiring U.S. attorneys and all the stuff you normally do when you are about to turn over, pieces of your investigation to the FBI for action.
But they have their own prosecutors. The fact that they are bringing in all these FBI and Justice Department, U.S. attorneys and stuff means that they are expecting big cases, lots of filings, probably multiple more prosecutions than we've even heard of. Like, they are preparing for something sizable when they are offloading that, when they already have a staff of like 17 prosecutors.
I have to ask, is this what Trump meant by cleaning out the swamp? Like, is he just being so egregious that they're actually going to get rid of everybody doing this shit?
I mean, I guess
well, you know how Pond of Scum like rises to the top? So like he brought them all up with him to the top, so then we could like just go in and like take them all out at once. See, that's what we're doing here. Obviously.
Can you also predict the future here?
No.
Yeah, we do actually. We have predicted the future, remember?
Which time? Because I do actually do that kind of often.
There was episode like 53 with the graphic, right? Oh my gosh, I'm not remembering, and
I mean, I think there's been a couple times where we've said something and then later on we were like, oh, we said that like 5 episodes ago.
I think
We
did
do
call
talk for
the,
hours though, so I
It's
think
true.
I think that helps.
We're pretty good at broken clocks, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
I'm just hoping to predict like how exactly those who voted for him just believe anything that they hear about what's coming out in these investigations.
I don't have to predict. I'm from Texas. My entire family voted for him.
Yeah.
I get to have conversations with them about how they still totally are on his side and how this is all an attack and how he didn't do anything. And you show them the 0 charges and the 0 indictments from the unbelievably long Benghazi investigations, and then the 5 actual indictments at this point, but like 16 total charges or something, and like the amount of stuff that's already come out of the Mueller investigation, and they're like, yeah, well, this is some kind of a witch hunt, so of course they're filing stuff against everybody, and it's like, no, they did it, and these people didn't. Like,
Right.
That's what's going on here.
So then how does that end?
Badly.
Revolution? I don't know. I mean,
It
Like,
doesn't
how does
end
your
well.
family come to terms
Have you been
with...
reading the Second Civil War letters on
Yes.
Twitter?
Yes. Oh, they're so good.
let's not do that.
But
A
it's so
lot of
good.
people died in the first
No,
one.
the hashtag.
No, the hashtag.
I know. I'm just saying. Let's avoid that. I don't think we could rise up against the government. Anyways, they have too many weapons.
I don't think the government will get
No
involved.
amount of Second Amendment will allow the populace to have more weapons than the government has,
I
or
don't-
be more trained with them than the government is. So, I mean,
I just don't think that everyone's going to get involved. I think they're going to let a bunch of SJWs ride out there and beat up on a bunch of kids with MAGA hats, and everybody goes home, and the government doesn't give a shit. Like, I honestly think they might just let us do that at this point. Like, you guys need to get this out of your system. Just fucking purge it. I don't care.
wow. I mean, I'd watch. I just don't want it to happen. It's like a lot of television, so, right?
Well, okay, sure.
So now let's talk about immigration, because this, as stated in the notes here, wonderfully, wholly unnecessary immigration crisis continues. So it's been 2 weeks since Trump signed an executive order attempting to address the immigration problem that he basically created with his zero tolerance policy. Sure, you can argue that these rules were on the books already, but there wasn't a zero tolerance policy to it, and they weren't being enforced in this way. And so this is his fault. He could end it. He is instead saying Congress should end it. That's because he wants them to fit the wall into whatever bill they pass for this. And that's not going to happen, I don't think.
Yeah, it seems really unlikely.
So that's where we stand. Him wanting the wall, Congress not being willing to put that into any bill they actually finalize, and a bunch of people's lives in the mix just sitting where they shouldn't be, far away from their children, wondering what's going on. Some of them not knowing where their children are. Some of them, the children couldn't even speak by the time they were taken from their parents, and could never tell you who their parents were and how to get them reconnected. And all this because Trump wants his wall that we don't need.
And, he's signed his executive order allegedly addressing the issue, but we don't actually know if it's been addressed at all, because officials won't tell reporters anything in response to questions on the subject. When they get asked how many separated children are currently in custody, whether they've stopped separating them, like, the reporters are asking them all these questions and not getting answers. So we literally don't even know that it's actually stopped.
I mean, we do know some things. The Massachusetts legislators did all head down to see one of these Trump camps, and I don't know if you've seen the video of Elizabeth Warren coming out. Like, the reporters were right there, and she's a tough woman, and she's just visibly disturbed by the situation. Catherine Clark, who represents us here in Malden, has been working on this. She managed to get, to help one mother reunite with a child, which super good. Take your wins where you can get them, but statistically, it's not even a drop in the bucket. We have
Thousands.
and there's all these stories of people who are even going through the proper methods. There's a woman who is being interviewed who was an asylum seeker, went to a port of entry, went through all of the appropriate steps. Asylum seekers are allowed to skip the port of entry.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually allowed by international law. But she went through it the proper way anyway. Still had her children removed. Still has not been able to get in touch with them. And they're keeping these kids in atrocious conditions too. Like, I don't encourage anybody to, get too much into the misery porn and, looking at the babies in cages and everything, but they're keeping these kids in very cold conditions. And there are actually kids who are starting to get seriously sick because you shouldn't be hanging out in 60 degrees on cold concrete.
No.
That's not a good situation.
However, I would recommend if you do actually want to go and see what's going on, you can go read about it all at trumphotels.org.
Yes.
As an activist has that, and has set up a wonderful site. It is quite great. And by that I mean it's horrible, and don't look at it unless you're prepared.
For our listeners who are in the United States, there is the Feinstein Keep Families Together Act, which is currently the best bet for trying to solve this problem through Congress. Folks who are in Massachusetts, you're lucky. Every single one of our representatives and both of our senators are all co-sponsors on this one. But if you're in a swing state, if you're somewhere where the Republicans sometimes move, even if you're in a state where, the Republicans are complete jerks and they will never, ever move, blow up their phones anyway. Because this shouldn't be a partisan issue. It just shouldn't be. It's... I'm trying to find a better word than deplorable, but it's just not coming to me.
That is the correct word.
It is.
Don't let them take your words from you.
Well, I mean, this weekend we definitely got some words. That was,
so on immigration, of course, there was the march in 700 different locations here in the States. We had a large one against family separation in Boston, depending on the state police or the Boston police or the reporters. You either had just over 10,000, just over 20,000, or just over 30,000 people there. Having been to many of these where I've seen the numbers, it did look between 20 to 23,000, around that range that showed up. That the march was large, the presence on the common was large.
Yeah, it was definitely hard for them to eyeball, I think, because it was very hot in Boston this weekend. We're not super great at the heat in Massachusetts. I know some other states, you guys are looking at 90 degrees like, pfft, but we're not, we don't enjoy that here. So there was a lot of people separating into areas where there was shade. I wound up throwing on a marshal's vest and not having any training at this thing. So it was a lot of fun running around there. But one of the things that I wound up doing actually was going around to these groups at the Common who'd basically gotten separated from the stage, and they're like, we're here for the rally, we've got our signs, we can't hear anything, and going through and talking with them about like, okay, let's talk about next steps, guys, let's do this thing, let's try to keep the energy up and everything. And it was great, but also like as I was sitting here doing this, I'm like, why have we not started doing this as a standard procedure when we're doing events on the Common? Why?
That's a good question.
So it's something that I've been talking with other folks about. I think activists have this real problem where we don't retain a lot of institutional knowledge, partially because of burnout, partially because everybody shows up and they have the best ideas and want to drive the bus. When you have a situation like that, it's good to talk about it with other folks and try to make sure that gets held on to. I did remember partway through, I am standing there on, I think it's Beacon Street, just streaming myself hoarse, trying to get people to not go down the stairs and keep going down the parade route. And then who's there but my buddy Sam Hammer in the middle of the crowd.
You were an angel amongst us.
That's not true. Angels don't scream like that.
In a bright orange coat or vest. But it was great.
It's crazy that this is our like social gatherings now.
Yeah.
It's like going and yelling about Trump and yelling at Nazis, which is what my dear husband was doing.
Yeah, so they showed up. The Boston Freedom Rally group, who have thrown a couple events now in Boston and appeared at all the other events, including the Boston Common ones, the ones out in Concord, but all the ones thrown by the alt-right who are really attempting to show their support for the Second Amendment, their support for Bush, and all these other things. But in reality, they are giving ground and places to speak to white supremacists and neo-Nazis.
And they know it.
And they know it no matter how much they say they don't, because you can go and read their leaked chat logs, which not only the Boston group leaked, but now Unite the Right leaked also. And every one of the chat logs of these groups of people talks about how this is great cover for them to actually be Nazis and no one knows. When we're all standing there yelling, that you're Nazis in public, and they still somehow think they're hiding. Like, no. So 6 of the blue bloc showed up to the marches this weekend here in Boston, and cops very quickly surrounded them. The blue bloc is much like the anarchist side has their black bloc. So you see these people show up wearing black ski masks and black clothes, pants, shoes, everything. So they're just completely blacked out. Well, the blue bloc are now the right-wing side of that. They call themselves the anti-black bloc. And they show up and continue to be in the pen, in the kettle with the known white supremacists and neo-Nazis like good old Camden of the American Guard, who is the American Guard's vice president, of course, and wears his American Guard shirt proud at every one of these events. He is from New Hampshire, and they are...
Which one's the American Guard?
They're out of New Hampshire, but they have popped up in other states now, and they are straight white supremacists who believe in separation of the races. They don't care if the other races exist, just they shouldn't be anywhere near the race they believe is the right race, which is theirs, which is horrible, of course. So the police surrounded them because the police continue to protect the bad guys. Although, I do say I wasn't, hoping for anyone to get injured there. But then the police themselves were surrounded by a few hundred of the actual marchers, a lot of the black bloc and anarchist types too, anti-fascists. And it was really interesting watching it all, because that's right where I happen to go every time too. That is definitely my scene. And I'm standing next to all these people who I'm getting very used to starting and running chants with and yelling and screaming about the Nazis being Nazis. Finally, after a relatively short period, they lasted only about 30 minutes or so, they realized not much was going to happen here, and they probably needed out of this crowd. So they started having talks with the police about how do you get us out of the middle of this crowd of many thousands of people who are currently very mad at us. And the police formed a line with their bicycles around them and in front of them and behind them and started moving through the crowd so they could go. So a bunch of us followed it, of course, continuing to tell them to leave and hope that they left. And I live streamed all of this on Facebook. As we continued to get farther away from where the actual protesters were, slowly people would fall off, and it got down to the point where there were about 10 of us that were actual, marchers and actually there for the anti-family separation march, and then the 6 of the blue bloc, and the police kept a presence and kept trying to get in between us and them and let them run off. And I kept moving around the police as they did it until finally I was the last one left for a few blocks. A couple other people went around and met up with me. So we ended up with about 4 of us following them for nearly an hour as they, in their own words, tried to just get home. Could you leave us alone? Could you stop following me so I can go home? As we explained, could you stop being racist so, we don't have to do this stuff? And, what's your name again? As they were masked up. So, of course, they weren't going to say. And we got to the point where they were leading us all around this maze of Beacon Hill, which is this area in Boston. And they ended up in a corner, and I looked around, and I was the last one left on my side, and it's 6 of them. And one of them says to me, it's now 6 on 1. We could get violent if we wanted to. We're not violent people. And I said, then why are you here with all the other violent people every single time, screaming and yelling all of these violent things? And it was very interesting because they actually started begging to be allowed to go home. One of them actually cried, like you can see it on camera. Please, won't you just stop filming so we can go home? And at that point, I felt a little sad for the Nazis. Only a little, but also it was like 100 degrees out, and I wanted to go home too.
The way I see it is that you can't chant Nazis go home and then not let the Nazis go home.
Right. So I slowly backed out of the alley, you know, so I could keep my eyes on them, and they stayed in their little corner there. But you can watch the whole thing transpire. It's like a hour-long video on my Facebook where I just follow the Nazis around live streaming, yelling at them the whole time. It was great because there was one really strong Antifa guy who kept up with us, who was yelling all the best things at them. So we kind of had the comedy relief, you know, going the whole time. I think it's a good video. Everyone should probably go check that one out.
So, Sam, I am a single issue voter. Where are you on Nazis?
Oh, you're expecting an answer that wasn't rhetorical? I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm not a fan. It's actually a little triggering. So, not a fan of Nazis.
Right. You know, and so I got into an argument with them at the end. I walked over and decided, you know, I'm alone with these people now. Let's at least ask the question, because they were screaming, "We're not Nazis. Stop calling us Nazis. We're not Nazis." And so I asked them the question that, you know, really needs to be clarified if you're not Nazis. And that is, why every time I find you, you are standing next to a bunch of people who actually call themselves neo-Nazis and actually are white supremacists and actually espouse those specific beliefs. And their response was, every time we show up to these events, the cops kettle us in with them and put us next to them. We don't go next to them. The cops force us next to them. And I'm like, you know, I would kind of believe that, but I actually watched you walk into those kettles multiple times of your own accord, walking right over to those people and shaking their hands and hugging them and everything. So I don't know that I believe you.
Also, you know, there's this weird thing. I've been to a bunch of these protests. Never once have I ended up kettled with the Nazis.
Yeah, they have never put me in that bin.
The cops seem to make a specific point of putting themselves between me and them.
Yeah,
Like,
so
it's
that,
almost
that
like
was their argument.
I don't get perceived as being on the same side for some reason, and then don't choose to associate with them when people make that mistake.
Do you also not go on Facebook groups and Slack groups and say Nazi things and then get it leaked when you're claiming you're not a Nazi?
Yeah, weirdly enough, I don't do that.
Because that's a thing they do.
You know what's funny? You know, I've never accidentally like worn any clothing or other symbols on my body that would imply that I support Nazis. It just never accidentally happens to me.
Now, I did get the very standard best response out of the group of 6, which two of them, one stood up and said, "But I'm Jewish. I can't be a Nazi." And I was like, "No, you're the worst." and then the other one stood up and said, "I'm gay. I'm not like any of this. What are you talking about? I just believe in the Second Amendment." I said, "Also the worst." And they just don't get it. Like, if you want to be not a Nazi and you want to be thought of as someone with a valid opinion, how about stop hanging out with all the Nazis?
How about
insisting that you are a member of a group that was victimized by the Nazis doesn't help your credibility there. It just makes you look like a dumbass.
It really does.
So yeah, so that was a weekend.
I love these folks. They're always like, "Oh, virtue signaling, blah 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 blah," and then they'll like,
"I can't be a Nazi. I'm Jewish."
In everything you're doing, you're virtue signaling. Like the fact that you're even putting on your blue baklava or whatever, you know, the fact that you got dressed up for this. Like, I get dressed up for protest too. Don't get me wrong, but like, you're choosing what you're putting forward. You're choosing what people see. It's all a piece of the whole drama there, and you are choosing to cosplay as a Nazi sympathizer. So maybe put on a different fucking costume. If you want to show up at these and, you know, be a rational human being, it's really easy to not get kettled. All you have to do is not start shit and not dress like you're there for a fight. That's seriously it. There was somebody in the March for Our Lives, the anti-gun thing, who had a big, you know, full body poster that he was wearing, you know, sort of sandwich board style, that said, "I'm pro Second Amendment. Please talk with me, engage in civil conversation." I told the kids not to engage with him because that's a sea-lining asshole, but he was able to walk through the march without being harassed by a single person. Because he kept his fucking mouth shut. He didn't wear any Nazi regalia. He didn't wear anything that implied he was part of the alt-right or anything else, and he didn't start a fight. if you don't want to get kettled with assholes, don't be an asshole.
Pretty simple. So I do plan against my wife's seemingly better judgment, although I disagree with her, on inviting the blue blockers onto the show. She says don't give them a platform. I say I would love to talk to them about the fact that they think they're not Nazis.
I know, but you're encouraging. It's like letting the toddler have the ice cream cone after they threw a fit in the parking lot.
It's hard to rationalize irrational behavior.
It really
And
is.
Hate is one of the most irrational of behaviors.
They say they don't have that. They say they are literally just on the right and they believe in our country and law enforcement and the Second Amendment.
And you remember like 20 years ago when the big thing among white supremacists was that they didn't hate black people. They just loved their own race.
Oh, yeah.
And then they, would go and talk about how they all need to kill all the black people and
course.
et cetera, et cetera. So,
I gotta say, like, the most relevant quote is from the dumbest source on this one. Did you see the Captain Underpants movie?
Oh boy, Captain Underpants. Here we go.
Sam's got kids. She's
I
smiling.
did, but I usually fall asleep right. I'm sorry. It's at the wrong time of day for me.
No, it's fine. Here's the thing. At one point, this little snitch in their class literally rats the protagonist out for something. And they're like, why would you do that? And the snitch goes, well, somebody has to stick up for the man. You don't have to stick up for the man. The man can stick up for himself. That's the whole point of being the man.
The man just is there. we are in the man's world.
Indeed. So
No offense to the men.
let's move on from that fun stuff and talk about some civility.
I mean, it's not really moving on, is it?
That sounds like the same old bullshit.
Indeed.
Especially given some of the topics we have to talk about on
we don't
civility
get to
here.
move on, so because that's just the world we live in now.
Yep.
So ProPublica and Frontline have been working to identify the white supremacists who were at the Unite the Right rally in August in Charlottesville. And they've actually identified a few of them, talked to their jobs, talked to their schools and, their family and asked, do you support this person? And it's been great. So they have identified another one, Michael Macelis, a 29-year-old pursuing a PhD in UCLA's aerospace engineering program. Now, they say he's currently on leave from the program, but that seems to only have happened after ProPublica and Frontline uncovered him. He actually works for Northrop Grumman and has a security clearance that gives him access to all kinds of fun stuff. And they know that he is a member of the Rise Above movement, a Southern California group that expresses contempt for Muslim, Jews, and immigrants. And they have not fired him, let him go. And in fact, as I read, they gave him his clearance after finding out that he was a member of this wonderful racist group.
And to be clear, he's not simply someone that attended one of these rallies, although he attended several of them. He is specifically a member of this group, the Rise Above movement, that are expressly violent white supremacists.
They profess that you should actually attack these other races.
Their actual goal is street violence.
Yeah, and he has security clearance and works for Northrop Grumman, and UCLA was working on giving him a PhD, and they all knew it.
And no one
didn't care.
there seems to be bothered, yeah.
So this is the type of person that our government seems to think belongs in our wonderful military-industrial complex.
The problem is that people on the left aren't civil enough. Why can't they be civil like this guy?
Yes.
I remember a time when it took a lot less than that to lose security clearance.
I remember when it took a lot less than that to not be able to get security clearance.
So there's our wonderful new friend Michael. We'll see how that goes for him. Now that UCLA has him on leave from the PhD, maybe Northrop will get pressured, although I doubt it. They're another one of those wonderful places who have all the weapons and seem to not be bothered by anyone saying shit about them.
Well, yeah, it's easy when you're a multi-billion dollar per year defense contractor.
There you go. So now let's go to Portland, where the Portland police have been revealed to basically lean right.
Yeah, so this is about an internal report, a draft of the report about how they handled the demonstrations last summer, not the ones recently that also were a shit show when, the police completely failed to keep the Patriot Prayer Group from charging the counter protesters. But no, this was about last year, and they actually released the full report not too long ago, back in May, but someone got a hold of the draft report that actually had some bits that didn't make it into the final one, and that included parts like a police lieutenant saying that he felt that the right-wing protesters were much more mainstream than the left-wing protesters, with a group that was diverse in their viewpoints and tactics. Which, of course, they were quite diverse in their viewpoints on, what form of ethnic cleansing is desirable and
They had
how
many
quickly they should
options you could
resort
use.
to violence and,
Yes.
what groups constitute white. They had
Yes.
all kinds of diversity in their viewpoints, just not, any of the diversity that matters.
No, like many other, interestingly, white supremacist bastards, the Polish are not white, it turns out.
Or sometimes they are.
Yeah, but these people
Yes,
specifically, all you light-skinned Polish people, turns out they don't think you're white.
Yeah. And I mean,
do the Irish count? Where are we on that one?
they usually count these days. It's
Okay.
been about a century since they, pretty much consistently got included.
I thought Polish people became white around the same time as, the
Yeah,
Irish.
but you have to
some
remember,
groups.
yes, you have to remember that the Nazis very specifically didn't include the Poles and Slavs as
Oh,
being
right.
Aryan.
I forgot
so
we
all
were
the
being
Nazis
strictly
inspired.
Nazi on
Right,
this.
right.
I keep
Because it turns
forgetting.
out that's where we're heading back to
you
right
I keep
failed
now.
to
forgetting
be
what
a-
century
you
this
forgot-
is.
You failed to be a Nazi.
Yeah, you were not fascist enough,
That is a
So-
badge I will wear proudly.
right?
But it's impressive how consistently we see this. Like, the police siding with the right-wing protesters and failing to contain them when they attack the counter-protesters. And then, judging that the counter-protesters are at fault for things that the police should have stopped from happening in the first place.
This definitely has nothing to do with the alt-right neo-Nazis intentionally infiltrating the police and military in this country.
We have a report from that report was like a decade ago where we knew that they were actively seeking and doing exactly that.
Wow. So,
Everything's fine. Nothing's on fire. Don't worry about
nothing
it.
is on fire. It's all
let's
on fire.
remind people just how important civility is, because the police in Pennsylvania seem to have a real good grasp on that.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
They
see,
do.
Pennsylvania has, of course, as many states do, a hate crime statute relating to ethnic intimidation.
That sounds promising.
Yeah. It's defined as malicious intention towards the race, color, religion, or national origin of another individual or group of individuals. And, it's supposed to be used where someone committed a crime based off of some sort of hateful motivation and attempted to intimidate someone in the process, right? So how could this possibly go wrong?
I mean, it's really clear that it's talking about, protected classes of people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes sense.
Sure. So, well, it turns out that what's been going on is that when you are getting arrested by the cops in Pennsylvania, if you happen to get upset and call them, Nazis or skinheads or Gestapo or something like that,
Things that
prepare to have ethnic intimidation tacked onto the charges you're going to get, because that was a hate crime against police officers.
do they understand that blue blood is not an actual thing?
No. See, because when you call someone Nazi, it implies that they're white and therefore is an ethnic intimidation attempt against them. Never mind that,
That is
as
what the
a white.
police in Pennsylvania believe.
Yes. Now, mind you, so far only 4 cases from 2016 have been identified there where that was used. That is 4 too many, and all 4 of them, the ethnic intimidation charges subsequently got dropped. But
Why did it come up in the first place?
because police really don't like it when you give them lip. And they are willing to use the full force of the law as they see it to go after you over that.
they don't file charges, though. That's not.
Apparently you're wrong, and they do file charges.
I thought that was the DA's job.
Well, you thought, but it turns out the DA basically just does whatever the police tell them virtually all the
Oh
time.
my God, DAs are not a rubber stamp.
No, DAs are not supposed to be a rubber stamp. And well, I hear Philadelphia has one that's actually not.
Yeah, Philadelphia has quite the interesting character.
That seems to be
we like him.
one of the few examples where the
Might
DA
be the only DA in the country that I agree with in any way.
I think
We
I think
have
I
a
heard about-
candidate that you might like.
Oh boy.
She's not here today, but she's awesome.
So, next up on July 3rd, good old U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions
Oh,
announced that the DOJ was rescinding 24 guidance documents that were unnecessary, outdated, inconsistent with existing law, or otherwise improper.
Now,
He didn't mention anything about the fact that every one of them was aimed at various distinct minority groups, and that this was unbelievably racist and or kind of jingoist, or any of these things that it actually is. He just wanted to say that these are unneeded.
oh, and it's not like any of removing these guidance documents changes the law. It just means that people that aren't lawyers won't know what the law says, so that if they have some sort of legal protections, they won't necessarily understand that.
It's basically a way to attack the immigrant community yet again.
It's not just immigrant community, also children that are suspected of crimes. It could be people based on race, native language, sex, disability, advice for homeowners who might be subject to predatory loans.
we are
kinds of
gearing
groups.
up for the next bubble.
It's true. I mean,
They are
gearing up
yeah.
for and or in the process of starting.
I see. I know when it's coming because all my friends start talking about wanting to buy a house and finally being able to maybe do it this time.
That's usually a sign that it's already well underway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's any stopping this thing. So if you're thinking about buying a house, maybe wait 2 years.
But then you won't be able to get one because they won't give it to you.
Yeah, you won't. There will be no credit available.
Right. But you save the money now, so you can get the shithole that you can clean up.
Indeed. So that's good old Sessions. And now where are we gonna go from there? I mean, we didn't invade Venezuela, so I guess that's good, right?
Yeah, I mean, apparently, you remember that time that there was that thing where Trump was like, we have many options for Venezuela, including a possible military option if necessary. Turns out that wasn't just like his usual.
No, he kept bringing it up and bringing it up and bringing it up.
It's worse than that because he actually started not with the public statement, but by bringing up to his advisors before that. And they were like, no, this is a terrible idea. What are you doing? And then he decided, no, you know what? I should bring it up in public.
And then he brought it up at a private dinner with all the Latin American states other than Venezuela,
Yes.
where he brought it up to them that this could be an option. This is what we could do. So that was another wonderful one. Luckily, turns out that he's finally decided that's a bad idea.
Or at least he was convinced that it was a bad idea. Unfortunately, it was by seemingly Rex Tillerson and H.R. McMaster, who you might recall are no longer part of the administration.
So he might change his mind again.
Yeah,
Because
and
remember,
next time there's no guarantee there'll be someone to talk him out of it.
correct. Because remember, the thing that he believes right now is the thing that someone just told him in the hallway 5 minutes ago.
Or
And
that
that's
he
as
just
good as he
literally
is.
saw on Fox and Friends.
Yes. So John Fitzgerald is a California Republican who has been advanced to face the Democratic incumbent, Mark DeSaulnier. And good old John Fitzgerald here is an anti-Semite and Holocaust denier.
Who goes on neo-Nazi podcasts.
Who goes on neo-Nazi podcasts and vowed to expose, quote, the truth about the Holocaust and how it's an absolute fabricated lie, end quote. His most recent posts on his campaign website are entitled, quote, why are powerful Jews pushing mass immigration and forced multiculturalism throughout the U.S. and Europe, and another lamenting the decline of civility.
Once again, a Nazi complaining about how no one is being civil to them. Also, weirdly,
we've seen this playbook.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, we have these beliefs and you're going to allow us to have them, or you're not being civil until finally there's no one else around but them in power. And then they're no longer civil.
Right. I mean, really, as soon as they think that they have the upper hand, they just stop being civil. They don't wait till no one else is there.
So I know we've brought this up before, but Sam, you don't strike me as the type who's been to a lot of punk shows.
I used to do ska, but I know it's definitely not good enough.
Hey, you know what? It's
I was
something.
all about the ska bands. One of my best friends was lead singer for a band, Muhammad Scali, and they were awesome.
It's
Good name.
all about the
Right?
bad pun names
Yeah,
too.
it really
It
is.
is,
The
it
entire
is.
ska scene.
Oh my god, there was a like little battle of the bands in the high school I went to, and one of the groups was straight out of Scompton.
Nice.
But anyway, like the reason I bring it up is, every time people start talking about being civil to the Nazis, the long and illustrious history of getting the Nazis out of the punk scene is always what comes to mind. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but so what happens is one Nazi shows up at the punk scene. And some people are like, oh no, it's a Nazi. And everybody's like, no, guys, it's cool. It's just one Nazi. We'll be fine. Just, And then 5 more Nazis show up and they start getting louder and meaner until somebody's like, you know what? Fuck these Nazis. And beats them to a pulp until Nazis decide they can't be here anymore. That is the only way that has been proven in the course of history to get rid of Nazis from a
Because
scene.
the alternative is the Nazis take over.
Yes, absolutely.
And they'll keep bringing more numbers until they can start the fight with the upper hand.
And it's crazy to me that people fall for the civility line,
Especially given that, like, it's not hard to look up. I mean, there's been multiple articles about this in the last month that you can find, just comparing like the rhetoric around what people were saying about the Nazis in the 30s,
Right.
where everyone was like, no, guys, just chill. It'll be fine. They don't really mean it.
And to be clear, I don't think it's the government's job to beat up Nazis. I don't think that the cops
I
should
think
be.
it's
That's
their
a
job to
civic
look the other way while you do it.
responsibility.
I flee the fifth.
Okay, well then. I mean, good times. Let's
And,
move
you know,
on
well,
that
I just
one.
want to add, for anyone that's unclear on which side are the Nazis, because there seems to be a surprising number of people that are unclear on whether it's the fascists or the anti-fascists that are the real Nazis, or whether it's the Democrats.
the fascists.
Just to be clear, John Fitzgerald, neo-Nazi. Paul Nehlen, white supremacist. Corey Stewart, some combination of the two. Arthur Jones, actual Nazi. Patrick Little, actual neo-Nazi. That is 6 people currently on the ballot in the United States for a federal political office that are actual Nazis. And every single one of them is running on the Republican ticket.
Funny that.
What a coincidence, right?
And whatever your problems are with the Democratic Party, and I'm sure, we have people with a lot
It's
of them.
probably less than mine.
But the fact is, when you have people speaking out against Nazi behavior, it is uniformly Democrats. I was at the Democratic Convention, and Maura Healey, who is our rock star attorney general for the state, specifically brought up the fact that we have Nazis that need to be dealt with in the state. And that is part of her job, is figuring out the legal means to deal with the fact that we have open Nazis in the streets. I know that not everybody on our side is going to be a perfect ally. Like, I know there are going to be times where we're not agreeing on the left, we splinter, it's a thing that we do, but like, the left is the side that's not Nazis.
I mean, the important thing is that, like, people need to realize that, one side is actual Nazis. And unless you're on the side with the Nazis, you really need to be on the side that's not the Nazis. Very expressly,
Pretty simple.
unambiguously, and consistently. There is never a justification for being on the side of the Nazis.
And, back to your blue blocker friends there, like, it would take very... Okay, friend is a strong term.
Strong word,
I
strong word.
apologize.
Strong word there, friends.
Your walking companions.
Yes, we did go on a nice long walk.
Not entirely voluntarily.
Pretty sure a couple of them were about to pass out. It was 100 degrees and they were wearing lots of layers.
Yeah. But
was
honestly,
fun.
folks who find themselves in that position where they don't necessarily agree with the leftiest left stuff that's going on in the anti-fascist movements, you can just stay home while we deal with the Nazis, and then once we no longer have a Nazi problem, we can have that civil debate you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't be hard.
The problem isn't civil debate. The problem is that Nazis aren't interested in debate. They're not interested in any kind of good
At
faith
all.
conversation. They're interested in taking advantage of the rules until they can take over.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not interested in debating whether or not gay people deserve to exist or whether,
Right.
you know, black people deserve to be shot in the street for no reason. Like that's not a thing that's worthy of debate. Like,
No.
sure, let's argue about how we're going to make the budget stretch to cover, you know, the healthcare services that we need to cover the roads, to get internet working as, you know, an actual utility. That let's have that debate. I'm
You
interested
know,
in
let's
that.
even, there are cases where there can be people have rights where the rights of one group conflict with another, and it's very difficult to tell what resolution minimizes the infringement upon people's rights and gives people, you know, equal protection under the law. That's a thing that you can actually debate.
It's happening
But-
right now, mostly with cakes.
But the debate is, there's no debate about, you know, these are deserving of basic human rights as opposed to fuck those people, they don't get any rights. There's no basis for having a debate at that point. You fundamentally disagree about the situation that is the reality of the world.
Yeah, if your side is anti someone having rights, then you're on the wrong side, just
Yeah.
the way it is. I mean, you run into this interesting thing where we are definitely anti the Nazis existing at all, but you know, at some point you just have to make that stand.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a necessary consequence of the paradox of tolerance, where unlimited
Indeed.
tolerance will inevitably lead to the disappearance of tolerance, as intolerant elements will take advantage of that to destroy tolerance.
And honestly, to me, it's not hard to draw that line.
No,
If you are arguing that, you know, people of this ethnic group, of this sexual identity, of, you know, this gender, whatever, if you are arguing that something that is inborn to humans makes them less worthy of rights, you're a shitbag and you deserve to eat a curb. But that's it. You know, if you don't agree that, you know, we need to make sure that healthcare is provided by the government, like, I can disagree with you, but I don't need to, I'm not up at an 11, you know?
Yeah, there's a very I think it seems weird that people have that trouble drawing that line when it seems so clear that if your political view is that a group of people based off of some, you know, intrinsic quality of theirs don't deserve equal rights, that's the problem right there.
Yeah.
If your view is not specifically that, then, you know, there's room for civil debate.
So anyway, can we get to talking about taking over the house?
We'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yes.
But first, I would like to, ask everyone, one, to just silently celebrate the fact that Scott Pruitt has resigned, but don't jump up and down. Don't like start a dance party with your friends, because while it sounds like a good thing, it is not.
Well, it sort of is.
No.
I mean, it means we might talk about him
I
less.
disagree with this being a good thing. This is a guy who kind of did some bad things, but was nowhere near as good as the guy who's going to replace him.
See, I think the problem is less that I think that Andrew Wheeler is less awful for the mission of the EPA than Scott Pruitt, because I think he is every bit as bad and likely without the just ludicrously transparent corruption.
He's way
But
worse.
there is one key difference, and the Scott Pruitt was the only actual attorney in the administration other than Jeff Sessions who had been confirmed by the Senate and therefore could replace Jeff Sessions without needing a new Senate vote.
Sure, we've gotten rid of the possibility, and of course, Scott Pruitt had actually asked if he could replace Sessions
Outright.
and told Trump.
We just found that out a couple days
He
ago.
told
that
Trump he wanted
outright-
to replace him, and would you please let me? But no. The problem I have here is that while Scott Pruitt is a trash fire, he is a very visible one. He's very bad at being a trash fire. He is very bad at doing bad things, and so everyone could see all of his moves.
Yes.
The person who is going to replace him, a former coal lobbyist, Andrew Wheeler, has been a lobbyist in D.C., a lobbyist for the coal industry, and has made all of his money off of very bad people who definitely do not want the EPA to even exist. But unlike Scott Pruitt, who is a moron, This guy seems to actually be really intelligent and good at lobbying and good at doing bad things and not getting caught, which means the EPA is going to look a lot better now while being a lot worse. And that is a worse situation than having the guy that you can at least see doing all the bad stuff.
In terms of having him in charge of the EPA, yes, I think he is a worse person in charge of the EPA because he will just be as bad for the mission and then
But
not
better at it.
right.
He
He'll be
will
more
be better at
competent
ruining it.
hiding how
Yes.
bad of a job he's doing.
Right.
It's just that Scott Pruitt resigning means he can no longer be Attorney General without
Sure,
a
but
Senate
it's the
confirmation.
Trump-Pence problem where,
Exactly.
you know, the only reason I'm okay with Trump, you know, still being president right now and nothing having being done that, you know, would end that is that it keeps Pence from being president. And somehow that's worse.
Although,
I don't know how
interestingly,
that exists, but
I was actually looking at public opinion polls the other day, a couple days ago, and interestingly, the data that I saw happened to include, you know, opinion ratings for a variety of politicians, including both Pence and Trump. And Pence was actually pretty much as unpopular as Trump.
He's awful.
He is. It's just that normally you expect, well, first of all, he doesn't have the name recognition and he's not in the news all the time because, well, Trump is sucking up all the oxygen and Pence is just that asshole in the background that no one wants to hear from, including the Republicans.
Yeah.
But as a result, you know, it's easy for him to be kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I was actually expecting that, you know, maybe his favorability rating wouldn't be all that high, but his unfavorability would be a bit lower because just wasn't in people's perception. But no, it turns out like everyone hates him as much as they hate Trump.
Well, he's awful and
Thankfully,
he deserves it.
because 100% earned.
In some ways, I think Pruitt resigning, you know, yes, there are problems with him being replaced by somebody who's actually competent at burning everything to the ground, but it is a good signal because how bad is it to have somebody fucking up that badly, that consistently, that publicly, and then have them keep their job? Like,
I don't know. Why don't you ask Donald Trump?
you know, I get your point, but at some point it doesn't matter because I would at least prefer the ones we know every bad move they've made to the ones that are actually competent at doing it in the background and not getting caught. At least with all the ones that we see every move they make, that we can document every mistake. When they get replaced, we can then just run that in reverse and fix some things. Whereas with the people who are really good at doing it in underhanded ways that don't get caught, it will take decades to undo the damage they've done.
If we ever can, because it'll get normalized and perceived as the way that, you know, just everyone does it.
And I want Pruitt gone, but like, I don't want him replaced by someone this much better than him. I mean, it's not, it's a really bad state of affairs when I look at the EPA and say, man, I wish Pruitt was still running that thing, which I think is going to happen in a few months after we see some of the stuff that Andrew Wheeler does.
please don't predict that. I don't want that one to come true.
Well, there you
I
go.
mean,
Prophecy.
Prophecy. So, of course, sticking with the EPA, former Alabama State Rep Oliver Robinson testified Tuesday that he accepted money to oppose federal environmental cleanup efforts in North Birmingham.
specifically from two attorneys with an Alabama law firm and a coal company executive, all working to the same end to keep the EPA from actually addressing the Birmingham Superfund site because it would have cost them money.
And they are currently in a case brought against them, Joel Gilbert, Steve McKinney, and Drummond Company, Vice President David Robertson, for this bribery.
Yes.
And so the person who was bribed just testified against the people who bribed him and provided evidence, to which they say this is just him trying to misrepresent, evidence.
Because he had already gotten in trouble himself, and now he's trying to, flip and get someone else in trouble so that he can reduce the sentence on himself. Of course, it doesn't seem like anyone has challenged the part where they gave him money or the part where he then went and advocated against the EPA. So their suggestion that he's misrepresenting what happened seems a little unclear as to
How is he misrepresenting?
In what material way could he be misrepresenting the situation? I mean, this is America, where apparently it's just not possible to bribe someone now because it's just called lobbying. Apparently, that's how that works these days.
These guys just didn't do it right. The money went directly from one person's hand to the other instead of through a shell company, and so it was bribery.
And they apparently, specifically, they didn't use all of the normal cutout language that you're supposed to use to avoid specifically and openly acknowledging what it is that's going on.
So that is that. We're going to watch that one and hope that they all three end up with long prison sentences, because the EPA is important, our environment is important, and we only have one of these planets. So it'd be nice if it still worked in a few years,
It really would.
And I have this friend, former roommate Charlie, who used to always tell me, he really hated the environmentalists who would talk about how we're killing the planet. And he would argue with me that it was very simple. We're not killing the planet. Doesn't matter what we do, this place is going to be here. We're making it uninhabitable for ourselves, but we're not killing the planet. A lot of other things will survive just fine. We're just killing ourselves.
I mean,
he's technically correct.
Sort of. I mean, I think it's reasonable to call, a mass extinction killing the planet when you're killing the overwhelming majority of life on the planet. And it seems like we're in the process of causing a mass extinction because, well, the evidence overwhelmingly suggests that we are doing exactly that.
Indeed.
So, there is a argument to be made for that constituting killing the planet, even though life will.
Those were definitely fun evenings having that argument with him, because he actually is in support of the EPA and everything else. He just wanted to make it clear that those dirty hippies were annoying him.
Well, it's the same as the George Carlin bit.
Yeah.
We're not killing the planet. The planet's fine. It's the people that are fucked.
Yeah. So now we move on to, talking about the people being fucked. The Democratic Party, which is, done a very good job of driving me farther and farther away from it over the last few years.
Specifically the Rhode Island Democratic Party this time.
Yeah, they're doing great right now. They've decided that they prefer drunk drivers over progressives.
Yeah, so. I mean, they for a bit decided that they preferred, Trump supporting Republicans over their own incumbent progressives. But
this is fantastic.
Yeah. So on June 28th, the Rhode Island Democratic Party filed a handwritten addition to a printed endorsement sheet that they submitted to the Secretary of State, where they endorsed a man by the name of Michael Earnhardt for the 3rd District in the Rhode Island House of Representatives. The 3rd District is currently represented by Maura Jane Walsh, who was elected in 2016, having defeated the incumbent Democrat Thomas Pelangio, who was a longtime fixture in the Rhode Island State House and well-connected politically. Maura Jane Walsh is, as I said, a progressive, big supporter of marijuana legalization, increasing the minimum wage, all kinds of, your standard progressive issues. And she actually made it in the news a little bit last year when there was a radio interview where she talked about how, the most surprising thing about entering the State House was all of the drinking they did. And why is it that you can't, drive a car when you've had 2 beers, but they're allowed to, vote on laws when they're drunk? So... she just entered and has been making some waves there. And they endorsed her challenger, Michael Earnhardt, who, previously had tweeted about how undocumented immigrants are self-entitled lawbreakers and thieves. Had also retweeted posts by Roseanne Barr, Donald Trump Jr., Mike Cernovich, Laura Loomer, all the alt-right figures and, shitheads on Twitter.
There's a great picture of him at a little rally holding a Make America Great Again sign with the same kind of chumps you see at those those groups.
Also, just so happens the public records show that a certain Michael Earnhardt of the same age and location as the one that is running registered as a Republican in 2014 and voted as a Republican in the 2016 election.
Or Trump.
Yeah, what a coincidence, right? And the Democratic Party endorsed him initially against their own incumbent.
Because again, they are trying to remove every progressive they can. They do not support any progressive causes.
Now, you might think that maybe there's some sort of, explanatory factor there that could possibly explain this that isn't just the Rhode Island Democratic Party being shitheels.
Is it that the National Democratic Party?
No, actually,
Okay.
it turns out that, there's other incumbents in the Rhode Island Democratic Party that aren't getting the endorsement of the state party.
And they happen to be progressive.
Progressive women, in fact, specifically. There's Marsha Ranglin-Vassell, the incumbent representing the 5th District. Again, big progressive. She not only a progressive, but a full-on $15 an hour minimum wage, wants to move spending from prisons to education, progressive, again, unseated a conservative Democrat, or a more conservative Democrat at least, in the primaries in 2016. The one that she unseated was a close ally of the conservative-leaning House Speaker for Rhode Island, and now is being challenged in the primaries by a Providence College theology professor who identifies as a traditional Democrat and a Catholic mother theologian and teacher, and is very much anti-choice, very conservative Democrat. And yeah, weirdly, turns out that they decided not to endorse their incumbent. And then there's an incumbent in the state Senate, Janine Calkin, representing District 30. Again, a freshman, defeated a longtime Democrat in the state party in 2016 thanks to a primary challenge. She's actually not only a Bernie supporter, but endorsed by Our Revolution, big on the Bernie-crat side of things. And instead, the party endorsed Mark McKinney, a friend of the incumbent she defeated, who had previously looked at running for the seat when that guy looked at running for a higher level of office. Now, they did eventually kind of walk some of this back. In response to the criticism yesterday on Wednesday, Joseph McNamara, the state party chairman, withdrew their endorsement of the Trump supporter, Michael Earnhardt, and withdrew the endorsement they made of a former state senator with multiple drunken driving arrests who's going for an open Senate seat against, again, a progressive Democrat, although this one wasn't an incumbent. So I guess at least they had some kind of justification for,
Did they?
Well, not for endorsing a repeated drunk driving arrestee, but, at least the idea that they could have taken a stand in the primary at all.
Instead of endorsing anyone, say the progressive candidates, they just decided not to endorse anyone.
Yes. So, they decided to unendorse the Trump supporting Republican, but they didn't endorse the incumbent Democrat that he's running against.
So basically, they're following the current DCCC and DNC playbook, which is how many progressives can we upset?
Yeah, that seems to be their main goal.
And still, like I said last week, the worst thing I've heard come out of the Democratic Party in the last few months is the idea that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is back in line for possibly running the party again. Yeah. She is literally the worst person ever to have run the party. And I think she should be in jail for many things she did. She is a horrible human being. I really want to be a Democrat, and they have made it near impossible for me to agree to a single thing that they are doing these days. It is horrible watching them destroy their own party by trying to go as far right and conservative as you can go while still somehow being on the left.
Because you see, they're not as right as the other guys, so therefore they're the left, and you have to support them or you're supporting the right.
The progressives are coming, and they can choose to either accept this, work with the progressives, work with the youth, and work with the people who are actually going to win all these fights. Over time, all these old people are going to be replaced. They can choose to get on board and come along for the ride, or they can get replaced. And if the fight gets big enough, the party itself is going to split and lose a lot of its power.
Well, I mean, if there's one thing that we learned from, things like the campaign of George McGovern, it's that the Democrats would rather sabotage their own candidates than let the left wing of their party win.
So having been on the other end of these endorsements. It's I'm grateful that the Massachusetts Dems have stayed out of all of these primary races. Any organization that's been coming in, even here in Massachusetts, has been really mucking it up. I think they need to just stay out and let the voters really decide. Endorsements don't vote. They are just a vote of confidence or unconfidence in people. And it's not faring well for progressives, even in Massachusetts. So
I got to say, the thing that shocked me the most was when I heard that NARAL had endorsed several male incumbents over female challengers in the primaries in Massachusetts.
I think part of it is that these organizations are beholden to the power that the incumbents already have.
Yeah.
They're still in session. They're still working through budgets. The budget hasn't even been passed yet, and we're in the new fiscal year. They are still beholden to the people who have been doing the work for them, and they're very risk adverse because it's scary. But they should stay out
There's
of
also
these races.
a lot of cross pollination. The people that were part of someone's campaign now move over to a position at one of the advocacy groups. The advocacy group person that was already high up there gets a position as the campaign chair or on the board for the campaigns. And then now they have personal connections and. Well, maybe I agree with this other person's positions more, but this person has been loyal to me for a long time,
Right.
and they're a friend, and
Yep.
our families know each other.
Yep, they've been doing exactly as they've been told, and they're fine enough. And that's exactly how we got into this broken structure that we have in the broken system. And I think the party should stay out. I try to equate it to Thanksgiving meal. You do not want to tell your mother that she does not make the best mashed potatoes, but you stay out of it when your wife makes mashed potatoes. Like you do not get involved. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree. We just run into this problem where, so the left, and come along with me for this one, has failed for 30 years. And that is not just like some weird speculation on my part, but it has been 30 years of decline in number of seats held in either house, in the number of terms served as president or head of really any major body of this government, and number of governor's houses held, number of state senates that are current majority, one party or the other. The Democrats have failed at local for so long that they are now showing very clearly to be failing at the bigger levels because of how badly they failed at local. And so while I think you're right in some strange way about like the idea that they need to stay out of some races, at the same time, the reason 31 governor's houses currently belong to Republicans, and both the House and the Senate and the presidency and everything else currently belongs to the Republicans, is because the Democrats aren't working hard enough local.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think the problem is that the Democrats get involved in the local primary races and take a side and are like, this is the person that we want as our candidate here. And, if they don't win the primary, then we're just going to, pull all our resources out of this district for this election and all that. But they're not. What the Republicans are doing that's so successful is just providing all of the base resources that the candidates might need to, be able to compete in the primary and, get their ideas out there. And then once they have a candidate, they just get behind them.
I mean, voting is like a very emotional sport. I mean, it's the person who delivers and who inspires the most emotion from the voters, or the voters are going to come out. People aren't going to take time out of their day just to go and necessarily do a very logical civic duty unless they are very logical.
What if it was on Sunday?
I am all there. This is yes. But I feel like Democrats have been really good at trying to push a boulder uphill consensus, getting everybody along, taking all the right votes. If you want something, you have to give something. But on the other side, they're literally just pulling people. They're pulling people. And if you don't come and you're not pulling, then we're just going to leave you behind. And we're going to be even more extreme and just keep taking things and keep pushing forward.
Works.
It has been working for them. It has been working for them. And if we are still going to play it safe, and if we are going to still keep the institution as slow and stodgy as it is, then we're going to continue seeing exactly as we have been in the last 2 years. We don't have anybody really fighting for us.
No, it's been very interesting. I mean, I can understand as a party when Bernie, as an independent who has honestly talked a lot of trash about your party, comes in and then suddenly is fighting for the nomination of your party. I can understand a little resentment in the ranks, especially at the higher levels, who are like, "What the F, guys?" At the same time, they should have seen the writing on the wall.
Right.
There was no way. I mean, I could never in a million years vote for Trump. I could never in a billion years vote for Hillary. And I am on the left, easily on the left. And I would have voted for Warren. I would have voted for 20 other women. I would never vote for her. And I'm not on the Republican side or anything. I don't believe 99% of the things they've ever said about her. I just know that she has done some unbelievably horrible things that I know. Like actual friends of mine on the other end of things that she did that got them killed. Her signature on the sale order for the weapons that shot my friends. When the people she sold them to specifically said they were going to use them to shoot my friends. So she's never getting my vote. And while that might be an unbelievable minority of the people who have it from that side, there was still a massive enough majority that was going to be the case. Whereas he had the youth. It was the same thing that they had with Obama. The youth showed up. And they should have seen that worked really well in 08. Right. The youth decided to come out for someone. And if you get the youth, you win. Because the Democrats, as we all know, win when more voters vote.
Right.
And the Republicans win when nobody votes, which is why they play the voter suppression game so strongly. And this party is doing nothing but self-sabotage. It's been years of self-sabotage by the Democrats. And it's hard to watch because you can watch every move and just look at them like side eye, like everyone in the party, like what is wrong with you people?
The part that makes it the hardest to watch is watching them do all this insanely self-sabotaging shit and then say that they're doing it in the name of pragmatism.
Oh, wow. There's a lot they could be doing right now.
Right.
There is a lot of youthful energy. There are more people that are new voters and first-time voters sitting around in small home groups that are calling themselves Our Revolutions. They are calling themselves Indivisible My Block. Like there are cities with like 10 different Indivisibles in them.
Yes, there are.
And these groups are full of everyone. I mean, some of the indivisible groups that I've even seen the members of here local to us, they range all the way from I'm 17 and I'm getting prepared to be super political, all the way up to 60-year-olds who are like, I'm done with the establishment.
Yeah.
But the youth are all involved over there. And the party is specifically fighting against those people at every turn. Every time the party can turn their back on those people, they are.
I'm not going to disagree. I think we had quite an anomaly in my little city because we had, after the election, we had a surge. We had 3 times the amount of people that were coming to our Democratic City Committee meetings. Now, again, snooze fest most of the time. And they came and we were still arguing about MailChimp versus BCC email and people started screaming.
Yeah.
They were coming because they were despondent. They were angry. They were just looking for a way to do something, to freaking do something.
Right.
And we weren't giving it to them until we decided to channel that energy. I think it just timing happened. The chair was leaving. I was happy to step in and we focused everybody. We said, you know what? It is not gratifying to call Paul Ryan and try to leave a voicemail, even though his mailbox is full. It is not gratifying to write a whole bunch of postcards and send them off. It feels good for a moment, but then you turn on the news the next day and shit still sucks. Yeah. But what is gratifying is that right here in our city, in our little city, we have an amazing progressive man who has been doing this a long time that does not know how to campaign, who is being challenged by a climate change denier right here. Let's win this battle. Let's win this battle right at home. And so that's what we did. We focused everybody right on our super hyper local election. And we had people turning out and hanging door hangers and calling people and standing out inside, like things that people have never, ever done before. Or it was like, it's organized activism within the party confines. So we can get in from the inside and really push. And
I
we
love
swept.
that. Now here's where I come at that sideways
Yeah.
with a problem.
Yeah.
On the Democratic side, you guys, I bet, used your own funds, found some fundraising, did whatever it took to get this off the ground. You have a location that you guys have provided. You have materials that you're fighting over, like choosing MailChimp or whatnot. On the Republican side, a group of half your size in a smaller location with less things has access to the Republican Party's tool set
Yeah.
and
And a
funding.
lot more money. Yes. Yeah.
And usually some kind of an official, even if it's 2 of them in a population of 10, they still have funding.
Yeah.
And so it's great you're pulling that off, but a lot of the reason the other locations around you aren't pulling that off is because the Democratic Party is not doing what the Republican Party
Right.
does on the local level.
Well, we had all this energy come in. We had to evolve, and then we watched what was happening in this city. We watched what was happening throughout this entire district in other smaller towns and cities throughout the area. They did not evolve. They kept their power. They kept their structure. They kept the same 12 people showing up every time to argue about how are we going to make $500 to give it to this candidate who
Right.
doesn't need it at all.
Yeah.
We evolved. We had to evolve, or we would have splintered. And again, when we have splintering, it really pushes both sides. But if you're going to constantly just keep fighting, you're not going to make much progress. I used to believe when I worked in City Hall, I was like, you can't fight City Hall from the inside. You got to get outside and fight City Hall. Well, then I got outside and I thought, oh my God, I'm never, ever going to win anything because I'm not in there. I'm not in there to do things when people aren't watching. I'm not in there to do things without permission. Nothing crazy, of course.
Right.
Just WordPress sites.
Right.
But if you want to change the structure, in my opinion, you want to change the system, you have to you have to do it from the inside and just blow it up. We'll see if that works. This is just my opinion and where I'm literally staked my entire life at this point.
I've talked with some other candidates, and especially DA candidate Donna Parlato, who I love her. But where I've landed on this is that in all of these fights, it needs to be a 2-pronged approach. We're not falling into these roles accidentally. It is the right move. We need people like you, like Donna, like other candidates who are going in to push for this much more progressive agenda from the inside, not even necessarily because we want, luxury gay space communism, but because the Overton window has gotten so far to the right, we need more people on the left to put the center somewhere that makes sense. Like, we just need it at this point. But we also need that pressure from these outside groups.
Yeah.
We need people, like, I'm not going to encourage anybody to smash windows, but you need people out in the streets yelling when things get bad enough. You need people who are constantly agitating for the world to be a better place.
And I think the person on the inside needs to be able to hear that
exactly
and bring it in. I said earlier, I'm not the chosen one on this race. I'm not the chosen one in this seat. There is somebody better out there who will run soon and maybe next time. But for right now, I'm willing to take everything that I have been feeling. I'm at the precipice of insanity, and that's why I'm doing this. But this woman who inspires me to my right, and all of the people that I've worked with and fought with and dealt with and lived with, and we've been through the exact same challenges. I can hear you. I'm here. And that's what we need. We need people who are able to sit at the table and make decisions, who are not tone deaf.
That is a constant problem in the Massachusetts government. Like, I love this state. I grew up here, born and raised. I will never move, and that makes my husband incredibly sad.
Yes.
He's got this slow nod going.
I do have the slow nod going. I am not a fan of New England.
But the thing is, we have this problem where we think, oh, we're the bluest blue state. We're one of the only states that went entirely for Hillary in the 2016 election, even though Hillary was,
The bluest blue state that always elects a Republican governor.
Yes.
Right. Right.
No, not the bluest of blue.
But the people we elect,
That's California.
like, because there's no competition, because we don't pay attention at the local level, because we're too busy, like, oh, we got to bus people up to New Hampshire, where nobody actually wants people from Massachusetts knocking on their door in New Hampshire. Like, I cannot stress this enough. Nobody wants that.
Seriously, you could probably do more good for a candidate by busing up people to knock on the doors and pretending to be for the other candidate.
Seriously.
Just be like, hi, we're from Massachusetts and we're supporting the other candidate.
Oh my God, it's like the old Scientology protests.
Yes, exactly.
So, we used to protest Scientology, which was super fun, and I do not regret it one bit. But one of the things we do is we dress like idiots, and we just sort of be, trying to hand out flyers and yell about Scientology. But it was great because if somebody listens to you and understands your message, then like they're going to avoid Scientology, right? But if somebody has a bad interaction with you and the only word they heard out of your mouth was Scientology, they're like,
They
ew.
assume you're from Scientology.
Like, it works either way.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh, I miss when it was easy, when we didn't have these super high stakes. But now it's like, if we don't get everything right at the state and local level, they're going to come and kidnap all of our neighbors and separate them from their babies.
Exactly.
And overturn Roe v. Wade. Like,
Yes.
why did it get this bad this fast?
Again, it got this bad this fast because it didn't get this bad this fast. It's been building to this bad. This is the crescendo of 30 years of deep-rooted Republican work at an unbelievably local micro level. They decided a long time ago, 3 decades ago, these literal decisions, this paperwork from them having these meetings exists online. You can find it all, where they made decisions to go local, and not just local that, literally your school council has GOP funding for its campaigns, but also mothers of nice, good-looking young men need a little more support so that guy can be raised to be a politician for us. Like that level of like local support.
Yeah, and the left does a terrible job of grooming young candidates. It's
That's such
just,
a bad word.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Don't do
I'm
that.
Sorry.
Of raising young
not
possible
cultivating.
candidates, cultivating
Cultivating.
candidates. There you go.
Supporting, yeah.
Just don't use that word.
Look,
Oh,
it's the right word. It's not my fault the pedophiles got it.
true. But this is where we reach, as the wave crests and hopefully turns blue. Please. But it's 30 years of hard work that the Democrats have allowed to happen and actively watched happen, while other people way larger than I am have complained about it and said, what are you doing? And they've just said, we need to focus our resources at the top. And that's really worked well for you.
Oh yeah, I mean,
It's worked great. So
great.
I would love to ask your opinion on a couple of my hot button issues.
oh boy.
They're not like, bad.
I'm good. I'm hopefully I'll be a lot less lame. Go ahead.
All right. So the my biggest issue personally is ranked choice voting. Adam Friedman is actually a friend of mine, and he's heading, Voters Choice MA
I'm
there.
a huge fan. I've never met him in person. Proceed.
But he actually got it onto the Democratic platform
Right.
somehow. He's really good with his words in front of crowds. But I really, truly believe that the only way to hold the two parties to account is to allow third parties to exist and not be as big a threat as they currently are. Right now, the argument is always, if you vote for the third party, you are actively and on purpose knowingly throwing away your vote. With the ranked choice voting system, no longer the case. And most other, functioning, although I wouldn't call ours that functioning at this point, democracies are, on some version of this. There are tons of them. And for many years, in fact, all the way back to the early 90s, a group called Fair Vote have been pushing this agenda. And you can go up to their website, fairvote.org. They have all the details of every version of it. And Maine has finally passed it, although it's been held up randomly in court, randomly out of court. Now it's going to go forward, at least in some way. What do you think about ranked choice voting? Are you for it? Are you against it? Do you have a strong opinion?
I have a strong opinion on lowering the barriers to democracy, to for obstacles. It should not be so hard to get the best candidates elected and to get people to have their choices matter. So I am in favor of ranked choice voting. I'm in favor of, again, flattening the hierarchy that we've already have in our structure. I'm not a fan that you are in one of two silos and that's all you have. I think it just perpetuates the problem that we have in our system. So,
All right. Well, there's issue number one. Issue number two. The Electoral College was necessary. The explanation given by people on the ground at the time that they came up with this wonderful idea was that we have a serious literacy problem and that the locals can't even read the flyers that say what the candidates believe in, let alone understand any of the big words they're saying. So there has to be a local advocate who can take all the locals' ideas of what the vote might need to be, work it down to their language, make sure they're right, and then go vote for them. I get it. When you're dealing with a population that, has an average education level of first grade, maybe this makes some sense.
maybe it does.
Maybe, but now
No.
we have the wisdom of the crowd. We have gigantic numbers. We have numbers that easily overcome all of that. We have education levels that average way higher. We have, for what they're worth, IQs that average way higher. We have everything at a point where we no longer need this.
I think the most important feature that has changed that could conceivably make an argument for justifying the Electoral College at one time is that at that time, there were huge communication lags. It was impossible for people, the millions of people living in the colonies and early United States to be able to communicate in any sort of reasonable time frame, especially when they were trying to coordinate decisions and respond to new information. It makes sense to have them choose representatives that can actually get together, have the conversation, respond immediately to new information, stuff like that. Well, people are probably familiar with the internet and, telecommunications and radio, that we've all had, some form of these sorts of mass communications that can speed that up for over a century now. Doesn't really seem like that justification really holds at this point.
Now it exists as a tool specifically for people like the Democratic Party to use their superdelegates and everyone else to force their choice through no matter what, and to not allow the people's votes to count. The last few elections have been, when Republicans have been won by the person who did not get the national popular vote. And so I am all for the abolishment of the Electoral College and all for the national popular vote. And I don't know if you know this one. This could be new to you or it could be one that you've been following. But the states are starting to sign on to an interstate compact for the national popular vote. And once they pass enough states being signed on to it that actually pass 50% of the vote, then anyone who has signed on to this has to now act in that way. So a state who has signed, when the total population of the states that have signed is over 50%, now has to no longer go with the Electoral College model and instead give all their votes to the national popular vote. And we are, depending on which states it is, only one or two states away from it passing legislatures. And one of them could be Texas if it goes, because it's big enough. And they're voting on it in the next legislation at the end of this year. So what do you think about the national popular vote and this wonderful interstate compact? It isn't legally an interstate compact because while they're calling it that because it works the same way, none of the states are actually signing paperwork together as states. Because the federal government gets to nix that if they don't like it. So they're just calling it that, but they're not doing it that way. They're just filing legislation that says they're still doing the same thing.
So I think the Electoral College is an extremely elitist premise, and every vote should matter. And so, yes, we need to have the popular vote actually make the difference and be the way that we elect our people.
So at some point, if you find yourself in a position of power in the state to vote that way, you would?
Yeah.
All right. That's what I like to hear. That, I mean, right there alone gets my vote. Just don't, that's enough for me. We are probably pretty far in on this one.
Yeah, I think our engineer was complaining about the time earlier.
Like 30 minutes ago.
Yeah. So
it just started to get good. No?
right.
It's so much stuff. It's hard to try to.
We'll get it in post. Don't worry. That's what the people say, right? So, one last thing I would like to mention that has happened for Detroit students in the never-ending destruction of Michigan, which, is kind of not a fun place to be. I've had to visit it a few times in last year, and I did not enjoy any of my stays in Michigan. They should get on that, But a bunch of students brought a lawsuit against the state about the fact that they weren't basically providing any kind of an environment where they could get an education. Unqualified staff, leaking roofs, broken windows, overcrowded classrooms, lack of textbooks and basic materials, no paper, no toilet paper, unsafe temperatures. Some classes were canceled due to 90-degree heat or classrooms so cold students could see their breath.
There was at least one case where an 8th grade student had to teach a math class for 7th and 8th graders for a while because they literally didn't even have a teacher for the class.
So the courts have dismissed the case the students brought, and the argument seems to be that the 14th Amendment contains no reference to literacy. While the state has to have a school system, while there has to be a public school system, and while it has to provide these grade levels, access to literacy is not established as a fundamental right. So the schools have to exist. They just don't have to give you access to literacy.
Even though, you could talk about, the equal protection under the law. How can you possibly have that if you can't read the law? Literally. In fact, how can you enjoy literally any of the rights protected to you if you can't read to know what your rights are?
All this literally means is that the state of Michigan can now just run its schools as daycares.
Yeah.
They don't actually have to teach anything.
Nope.
So having been a former Boston Public High School teacher, I had 2 sections of sex ed where I was teaching to mothers, already existing mothers, and I taught technology with in a classroom with no computers. That worked. I've been speaking with one of our local students now that because of this crazy funding system we have from states to municipalities with their school systems, our district, your district, throughout every municipal school district in this region anyway, is suffering some sizable budget crises where teachers are getting laid off. Schools are getting systems are getting dismantled because over $200,000 or $300,000, which is not a lot of money when you're talking about the state budget.
Right.
And so I've been speaking with one of our high school students about this movement for lowering the voting age. That if students had the right to vote in and elect leaders who are making decisions on their behalf and become customers, then some of these issues would be a little bit more important to people at the top. And so there's a movement called around 16 plus. And so some cities in Massachusetts have been moving this forward. It's kind of stalled at the state house level, of course.
Of course.
But we have an override coming up in my city. Other cities do too. And the students are the ones who are immediately impacted from these override votes. The majority of people who go vote on these override, which are tax increases, property tax increases on municipal level, are older voters who no longer have students in the public schools. We really need to shift our priorities on who these customers, who the voters are, and who is beholden to the people who are making these decisions.
For folks who don't know how funding for schools works, I know a little bit about how it works in Massachusetts, and I think it's similar in a lot of other states. We do this stupid thing where it's tied to the property tax. So if you live in a district where there's a lot of expensive properties, people who pay, the property tax on that are putting that money, partially towards the schools. What this means is that rich cities collect more property tax, have more money to put into the school system, have better schools. And every level of, failure when it comes to funding schools just exacerbates that. One of the things that drives me craziest, if you ever see these, box tops for education or labels for education, this drives me insane. And I see Sam over here nodding her head. She knows what's going on.
Poking my eyes out, actually.
What it is these, these big national brands have their little box top or whatever, the UPC, something that you buy their product, cut out the thing, hand it to your child to give to the school. The school collects this thing. Maybe it's worth 10 cents, maybe it's worth 5 cents, whatever. And when they've got a whole big batch of them, they ship them off to the national company and then they get that money back. Now, which parents have the money to buy the national brand stuff? Everybody's nodding, but nobody's saying the answer.
It's the wealthy ones.
It's the wealthy ones. Which parents are the ones who have the time and energy to remember to take the stupid label off of the trash before they put it away and hand it to their kid who is, well rested enough to actually remember to hand the thing over to the teacher?
The ones with nannies who are doing that for them.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like we have, and then there's the GoFundMe's and all of these other, stopgap things that we've got technology wise for people to like, oh, well, I'll fund this world rug for this one kindergarten classroom. Isn't that great?
The burden to make our schools and cities function are on the wrong people. Our PTO has to raise $40,000 per year. They have to figure out how to raise just to keep. And then we don't even have a library. I mean, to say your school has a librarian is to brag. It's ridiculous.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't want to earn your vote because I agree with those 2 or 3 things that you've mentioned. I mean, I want to earn your vote because I hear what you're saying and I'm an advocate for you on the inside. That as I was hoping we'd talk about net neutrality and broadband as a public utility, but next time.
We agree with that one entirely.
Yeah, 100%.
But yes, I believe in all of these progressive values, but the thing that matters the most, in my opinion, of somebody who's going to go up there and make decisions on your behalves is somebody who actually can hear what you're saying, understands where you're coming from because we've lived some of these issues together, and will go up there and fight on your behalf and will prioritize these issues for you. If somebody does not understand or hasn't lived these things or doesn't even know how this stuff even works, they're just going to toe the line and they're going to do the exact same thing that the system has set up for them, and you're going to get the same thing every 2-year cycle. I don't have time to wait. My family does not have time to wait anymore.
None of us do.
I can't afford it.
I'll throw out there before we go that, since you brought up net neutrality, broadband as a utility, and all the other fun things related to the internet is now a necessity, and according to the UN, a basic human right.
Yep.
We are lucky in one respect in this state that the person online pushing the strongest and the group online pushing the strongest, Fight for the Future and Battle for the Net, Evan Greer, is based out of JP. And all of that is really being spearheaded from here. And when it comes to the various plans and attempted bills at the federal level, Ed Markey here is really behind most of that. And so as a state, the people on the ground, the activists on the ground are really here trying to push for that, the ones that are internationally known for this fight. And at the federal level, the ones fighting the strongest happen to be from here too. So you're going to have a lot of support on those fights.
Well, let's do it because during the stimulus funds, Massachusetts received a ton of money to lay down the best fiber that money could buy at the time through Central all the way to Western Mass. Every municipal building, library, police station, city hall has the ability to be lit with the best fiber to provide broadband not only to those buildings, but then to figure out how to get it to the next mile. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
It's way too expensive. But that's our public. That's ours. We own that. So we need to get people in on Beacon Hill who understand these issues, who can really make some bold action and just get it done already.
Let's go.
The hard work's
Everyone,
already done.
this is
Can we do the quick, tell people to do stuff?
absolutely. Let's end it on some action items.
All right. First off, Sam, plug your website.
Thank you.
Do the thing.
My name is Sam Hammer. I'm at samhammer.org, SAMHAMMA as an Apple R, but because I'm a good technologist, you can type in Sam Hammer with an ER.org. You'll also get me, samhammer.com. You'll get me, but samhammer.com gets you somewhere in Asia. So I got most of the domains. But yeah, I'm here in Massachusetts. I'm fighting for the 5th Middlesex, but the decisions that are made under the Golden Dome impact everybody in the state, but also can reverberate throughout the rest of the nation. So check me out anytime.
And wherever you are, figure out when your primaries are. If you don't know anything about the candidates, just vote for the person who isn't the incumbent. Just do it. I'm really serious because the incumbents get a lot of the default votes.
Seriously, do your research because you never know when it's going to be that Trump-supporting asshole in Rhode Island.
Oh,
True.
Very true.
better to do your research. That is correct.
All right, everyone. This has been episode 63. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GreggHoush Show and on Instagram at GreggHoush. If you like what you've heard and want to be a part of it, check out patreon.com/GreggHoush Show. In exchange for funding our programming, you gain access to exclusive content such as uncut editions of our podcast. We have new episodes every Thursday night. We hope you listen in. The GreggHoush Show was created by Gregg Housh, executive produced by co-host Eric Gowrays, and co-hosted by Kayla Avery. Other contributors include producer and writer Anna Jeffrey, co-host producer David McGuffin, and writer-engineer Robert Tortora. Theme music for this show was produced and recorded by Geneva de Colbert. Our interns include co-host Casey McLaughlin, writer-engineer Alec Greeny, writer Maddie LoCicero, and associate producer, writer, and announcer William Kennedy. You're listening to New Revolutionary Radio, your call to action.